greatest train robbery of all times during the dark night of August 8, 1963, a Royal Mail train was traveling from Glasgow to London. In one carriage of this train were bags filled with banknotes, amounting to approximately £67 million today, or about 800 crore rupees. The train driver, Jack Mills, was speeding the engine through the darkness of the night. Suddenly, at a crossing, a red signal light flashed. For the driver, this was abnormal because a red signal at this time and place made no sense. Nevertheless, driver Jack Mills immediately applied the brakes and stopped the train in the middle of a deserted track. For a moment, silence fell all around. But hidden behind this silence was a master plan that was about to execute the biggest robbery of the century, the Great Train Robbery, where the train itself was stolen. Welcome back to ZM TV Videos, dear viewers. This sounds like a movie story. But in real life, these robbers planned with intense suspense, looted millions of pounds from a British government train, and that too, without firing a single bullet. Everything began months earlier, when some well-known criminals from London sat together to plan a new heist. Bruce Reynolds, the mastermind of this plan, along with a few associates, started devising an unprecedented robbery. He had secret information about Britain's national postal service, the Royal Mail. This secret information came from a senior security officer at the Royal Mail itself, someone whose identity nobody knew. The information was, on a specific day, a huge amount of money would be traveling in a special carriage on the Glasgow to London train, known as the High Value Packages Carriage, or HVP. That was the carriage they needed to rob. Bruce Reynolds and his associates were well-known criminals, but they had no experience robbing a train. So, they brought in another gang from London that did have train robbery experience. This notorious gang was known as the South Coast Raiders. Gradually, the team grew, and more than 15 people became part of the plan. They decided to rob a government train without firing a single bullet. But this was no ordinary heist, not something like stop the train and loot it. Months of planning went into it. On August 7, 1963, at 6:50 p.m., the train departed from Glasgow Central Station for London. It was scheduled to arrive at London's Euston Railway Station at 4 a.m. the next day. The train had a total of 12 carriages, and 72 post office staff were on board to sort mail during the journey. This train was specifically run to drop parcels and mail at various cities. That's why, without stopping, parcels had to be dropped at different stations. Whenever a station approached, the local post office staff would hang bags on a special elevated rack. As the train passed through the platform, it would slow down, and the staff inside would grab those bags using a net. Similarly, the bags to be dropped off at that station would be unloaded while the train was still moving. Through this process, mail was distributed to various stations without stopping. But the carriage to be robbed wasn't even attached to the train yet. That carriage was safely parked at the Nene Valley Railway Station. This carriage was called the HVP, High Value Packages, because it mostly contained large amounts of cash that people had sent as money orders to other cities. In 1960, 3 years before this incident, the Post Office Investigation Branch, the IB, had instructed that security alarm systems be installed in HVP carriages. By 1961, 3 HVP carriages had been fitted with these alarms. The older carriages without alarms were kept in reserve. But on the day of the heist, the security alarm-equipped HVP carriages were out of service. Therefore, a reserve carriage, M3024 million, had to be used, and it had no security system at all. This was a huge tip that the robbers received from the Royal Mail insider. When the train from Glasgow reached Nene Valley Station, the railway staff connected the HVP carriage right behind the engine, second in line. That was the first tip the robbers got. But the second tip was even more important. Normally, HVP carriages contained around £300,000. But because the previous week had been a bank holiday weekend, on the day of the heist, the carriage contained nearly £3 million in cash. That was tip number 2. The coincidence that happened that day probably occurred only once in years. 12 times more money was going, and by chance, The HVP carriage with the security alarm was also faulty. But for the robbers, this wasn't a coincidence. They had been planning for this exact day for months. The train, with the HVP carriage attached, departed from Nene Valley Station. Night had fallen, and the driver, 58-year-old Jack Mills, was speeding toward his destination. Meanwhile, the gang of robbers was lying in wait in the bushes near the railway track. Their planning was absolutely perfect. Around 3 a.m. on August 8, 1963, one of the gang members began tampering with the signal at Sears Crossing. He put a glove over the green light to hide it, used a battery to turn on the red light, and then everyone hid and waited for the train. When the train approached Sears Crossing, the driver was very surprised to see a red light here, because normally trains, especially Royal Mail trains, aren't stopped at this crossing. Nevertheless, Jack Mills applied the brakes and stopped the train right at the signal. Suddenly, silence fell everywhere. At that moment, the assistant driver, also called the second man, got off the train to contact the signalman using the trackside telephone. When he picked up the phone at the signal, he found that its line had been cut, which was part of the robbers' plan. As the second man was about to return to the engine, the robbers emerged from the bushes and subdued him. Several robbers climbed up from both sides of the engine and tried to subdue the driver. When Jack Mills resisted, one robber hit him on the head with an iron rod, and he lost consciousness on the driver's seat. The robbers had come with complete planning. While this commotion was happening in the engine, some team members detached the first two carriages from the rest of the train. Their plan was to take the train away from there. But where? About 1 kilometer from Sears Crossing was Bridego Bridge, and that's where the robbers' truck was waiting. They had also brought a retired railway driver with them, whose job was to drive the train to Bridego Bridge. Everything so far had gone according to plan. But now the robbers faced their first problem. The driver they had brought panicked when he saw the controls of this new engine, because he had never operated this type of engine before. Forced by circumstances, the robbers tried to bring Jack Mills back to consciousness and forced him to drive the train the 1 kilometer. The engine and two carriages started moving again and were stopped at Bridego Bridge. During this time, the staff in the remaining carriages, which had been left behind, had no idea why the train had stopped. At Bridego Bridge, the robbers broke open the HVP carriage door. Inside, they assaulted 5 staff members, tied them face down with ropes, and began their operation. The HVP carriage contained a total of 128 bags completely stuffed with cash. The notes were in denominations of £1, £5, and 10 shillings. The total weight was about 2.5 tons. The train was on the bridge, and below, a truck was stationed on the road. According to the robbers' plan, they had only 15 minutes. So they formed a human chain and loaded 120 out of 128 bags into the truck. The remaining 8 bags were left behind due to lack of time. Their plan had worked perfectly. But at the very end, they made just one mistake, a mistake that would later prove most useful in catching them. As they were leaving, one robber told the tied-up staff in the HVP carriage, "Don't even try to get up for 30 minutes, or you'll be killed." The robbers had an Austin Lodestar truck onto which all the cash was loaded, as well as 2 Land Rovers. To mislead witnesses, they had all used the same license plate number. BMG 757A. After the crime, they all fled the scene. After a drive of about 45 minutes, at 4:30 a.m., they reached their hideout, located about 43 kilometers from the crime scene, near a village called Oakley. During this time, they were listening to police conversations on a VHF radio, which helped them immensely. At the exact moment they reached their hideout, the police also learned of the robbery. But for now, the robbers were very happy. They arrived at the hideout and celebrated. They even played Monopoly with real banknotes. But their happiness was short-lived. Shortly afterward, they learned via radio that the police were searching for them within a 50-kilometer radius. The police got that 50-kilometer idea from the statement of the staff member, whom the robber had told to not move for half an hour. So the police had a good idea that the robbers must be within a 50-kilometer radius. Hearing this, the robbers panicked. Their plan to leave the hideout on Sunday was moved up to Friday. On Thursday, they divided all the money among themselves. The amount stolen was nearly £2.5 million. According to some reports, each person got about £150,000, which was a huge amount in those days. That equals about £3.9 million per person today. The remaining money was distributed among smaller helpers. Before Friday, they wiped their fingerprints off everything in the hideout. They assigned one person the job of burning down the hideout after they left, so the police wouldn't find any evidence. That person took the money but fled without burning the hideout. During this time, the police were searching the entire Buckinghamshire area. Helicopters circled over the city. Police cars rushed from place to place, and a frenzy erupted in the national media. The police announced a reward of £10,000 for information. Then, a man living near the hideout came forward. He told the police that there had been a lot of activity there on the morning of August 8. On suspicion, the police immediately raided the hideout. It was a leather-slatted farmhouse that the robbers had rented just 3 months earlier. There, the police found many pieces of evidence connected to the robbery: empty bags, mail, and a truck that had been hastily painted yellow. The robbers had wiped their fingerprints, but there were fingerprints on the Monopoly set they had played with using real money. Those fingerprints proved to be a major breakthrough in the case, because all the suspects already had criminal records. The fingerprints matched police and Scotland Yard records, and the real criminals were identified. Within a few days, the police had arrested 14 out of the 16 people. Only 2 escaped. One was the replacement train driver whose real name nobody ever knew, and the other was that senior Royal Mail security officer on whose tip the entire plan had been based. To this day, nobody knows that officer's identity, because he never showed his real face and never revealed his name. The court declared this the biggest robbery of the century and sentenced almost all the gang members to 30 years in prison. After this robbery, Bridego Bridge became famously known as Train Robbers Bridge, and to this day, that remains its informal name. Jack Mills, the 58-year-old train driver who was struck on the head, could never do that job again. Just 7 years later, he passed away due to the trauma. We hope you liked this LJM-TV video. Please like and share it. Thank you so much for your loving comments. See you in the next amazing video.